Excited to be visiting the fifth graders in Mr. Chris Podesky's classroom. Let's head on in and see what's going on.
Okay, so we're here at Spring Creek Elementary in Laramie, Wyoming with Chris Podesky, and he teaches fifth grade. And so thanks for letting us come in. We're excited to be here.
Yeah.
Great. And so to start out, we're in your fifth grade classroom, but we understand that you teach a GATE program. So give us an idea, kind of describe what that looks like.
Yeah, so GATE is a gifted and talented magnet program here in the district, and it's housed in a neighborhood school, but it is accessible to all district students, and they are tested in, and they are referred by parents or teachers. And what's really nice about the GATE program is it provides an opportunity for those students with real high academic needs to have those needs met. And so it's really important for gifted students to be around other like-minded students. There are also more social and emotional needs oftentimes with gifted students, and so having this program helps to address those. We're also really fortunate because we're able to incorporate a lot of project-based learning and place-based learning and other more creative real-world type experiences for the kiddos.
Okay, so you have fifth grade, and a follow-up thought would be then, do you have additional grades? So is there a GATE grade for each grade in the school? Yeah,
so currently we have a third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade, and it is a full classroom with a designated third grade GATE teacher, fourth and fifth, and we are able to get together quite a bit, so we're able to kind of teach across the grades, and we're real flexible with our grouping, so that's been really
great. So today we're going to be looking at some of your things that you're doing in your language arts. So describe that program, what we're going to see.
Okay, so with language arts, we have a couple different curriculums that we use, but we are encouraged to stray from the curriculum if the curriculum doesn't meet our students' needs. And so today, the lesson is connected to the district curriculum, but it goes into a bit more detail about a specific topic that we've learned about in the program to give the kids a bit more of a fuller understanding of the topic. But in general, with language arts, I think it's really important for the kids to find the content and the activities relevant. And so what sometimes happens is language arts feels a bit disconnected from students, and so doing everything that we can to make sure that that students are engaged through topics that are interesting to them, or creating products that are appealing to the kids. So.
And so your district does have a core program, reading program.
Yeah,
correct?
we do, and it's been pretty interesting because for the last 10 years or so, the reading program has been very typical in the sense that you have a story a week, you have the comprehension questions, so on and so forth. And so we adopted a new curriculum that is much different from that and is not focused on the reading foundations. So some of those skills and strategies that we've been drilling into these kids for years and years, suddenly that is kind of has taken a trip to the side, and so we're looking at more, in my opinion, more holistic, more focused on real-world issues, and the focus on speaking and listening is a much greater focus than it has been. So it's been a bit of a learning curve for all of us literacy teachers this year.
Okay. So you kind of addressed what my next question we were talking about was how to arrange and support your approach. And so really, you talked a little bit about that as far as going beyond what the curriculum might have and looking at the interests and the needs of the kids. Is there anything else that you do to support what you're doing with the core or additional instructional strategies?
Yeah, so in the beginning of the year, I look over, or the beginning of a unit sometimes too, I'll look over some of the big data. So we're looking at kind of results from standardized tests and bigger writing pieces and let's see, other tests that I give. So the qualitative reading inventory is one that I give. And so with that, I'm able to really kind of zero in on strengths and needs of particular students, and I look for trends. And so if I see that there's a full group that needs some practice with phonemes and decoding and things like that, I can pull a small group for those students. And the other piece that's a little different is if a student or a group of students seem like they're interested in a different topic, or maybe they have a question about a topic that we're studying, every possibility I can, I try to roll with that. And so I try to make sure that if a student asks a question, that I can address it in language arts time, if that's possible, and then really keeping the classroom student focused and engaging for the kids is important.
So lots of different modes of assessment that you have going on, and on
Yes,
an ongoing
always.
basis, obviously.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so are there any other ways that you would assess your students in reading and writing?
Yeah, so assessments are ongoing. I look to at everything that the kids say, everything that they write, both in and out of language arts time is kind of a check-in. It's just sort of the teacher part of me that's always kind of interested in how they're speaking, what they're interested in writing. You know, is the language arts instruction, is it transferring to science or social studies? So kind of looking across the board. And so with those kind of things, I'm able to sort of correct some of the misconceptions maybe. And so if a student says something that's not quite true, finding a way to kind of redirect their thinking or their knowledge on the topic. And then if the skill that I'm hoping that they acquire is more, maybe it's a 5th grade essential learning target, then what I'll do is I'll have very directed assessments. And so I might pick one day where they're constructing a written piece to determine whether or not they understand the topic, or maybe it's just a class discussion, and I'm asking for their feedback, and I take their input, and I use that information to see if they're understanding it. And then sometimes I might weave it into a more narrative fiction task. And so if it's looking for, well, do they understand the theme of this story or the main idea of this topic, can they weave it into their narrative writing? And so a lot of my kids really enjoy narrative writing, and so if they're able to show their knowledge through a different form, whether it's making a podcast or making a video or website or whatever, then I try to do that as often as I can to have some variety with the assessments.
Okay, so I'm going to jump back to one of the questions that we want to also address is like with classroom management and how your classroom's arranged. And you mentioned briefly that also your kids are grouped because there's different challenges and strengths both with their social, emotional, I guess, behaviors. And so when you think about how your classroom's arranged and also your approach to classroom management, how would you describe those?
Okay, so let's see. That could be that feels safe to the kids and is an engaging place to learn. And so with that, I try to make all my decisions sort of based on that idea. And so if there is some sort of misbehavior, maybe a student is talking out or something like that, I probably overthink, but I think about, okay, so what did the student say? What was the purpose of it? And so if it is maybe inappropriate but related to the text, I might sort of think about, okay, so that's not a huge problem, it's a little distracting, but he's engaged in the text and that's really important to me. But he also needs to know that there are certain behaviors that are expected in the classroom, and so it's kind of a big balancing act as far as what I'll accept, how I'll address it, and that sort of thing. And then I'll ask, I'll think about the context, and so if there was a misbehavior, was it one student, was it a group of students, what was the task that they were doing, maybe the task was not relevant or engaging to them, and then maybe I would address it by thinking about, okay, so what can I do next year or tomorrow to make sure that those behaviors don't become part of the culture of the class. And so that's what I think is really important, is to honor the kids as people. And being in a classroom for 8 hours is just not natural
Right.
for 10 and 11-year-olds. And so it's pretty amazing that they are able to follow directions most of the time. And so I would say that's my big philosophy with that, is to honor the kids and make sure that it's that how I respond to behaviors, what I do to be more proactive in creating those more positive behaviors, that it does create a safe
Management
environment.
and organization of it. So when you look around in here, I can see there's some flexible seating kinds of things, but there's also some independent spots. So just how you organize your classroom in general, how does that help promote what your beliefs are about classroom management?
So they definitely go hand in hand as far as the learning environment and the degree of collaboration. It goes hand in hand with classroom management for a lot of different reasons, but one is that the more the kids are collaborating and engaging, the harder it is for a teacher to control what is said in the classroom and to control the noise level, control the topics that the kids are discussing. However, I think that it's really important for the kids to engage with each other, especially for upper adolescents. They're more interested in what their peers think than what the teacher thinks. And so as far as learning goes, if I'm really interested and concerned with how they're growing as readers and writers, by deliberately choosing partners that will benefit as many people in the class as possible, I think that you've got this natural momentum, this social energy that can help the kids grow more than I could.
Yeah.
And with that, though, there are going to be off-task behaviors. There's only one of me, and when the kids are around the room in different places, it's not possible for me to necessarily facilitate every discussion and whatnot. But literacy, I think, is very dialectic, and so it's all about talking. I mean, literacy is communication, and so it's natural, I think, to have the kids talking as much as possible. But then you also have to think how to honor the introverts in the room too, to make sure that they're feeling safe in a talking classroom too. And so that's something that I kind of always think of and wonder how I can improve on.
Okay, so to kind of close things out before the kids come in, what will we see today? So as far as your plan and your objectives for the lesson, so what are we going to see?
All right, so the kids right now in their core program are learning about apartheid, and one of the overarching questions is how can sports, cause folks to get together and celebrate and work out their differences. And so the main event here that we're looking at is when Nelson Mandela was exonerated and then became president. One of the things he did is he was interested in rugby, and the rugby team, I think they were the, I can't think of it now, Springboks, and they were an all-white team. They really represented a lot of the power and privilege and racism that occurred in South Africa. And so Nelson Mandela, instead of just ignoring this team, really celebrated them, and he really got most of South Africa to sort of get on board with this team, and the team won, and everyone celebrated. So it wasn't just the whites or the blacks. It was everyone kind of together celebrated, and so that's the overarching topic and event. And then within that, we are discussing apartheid, and so the kids have been learning about just real general about apartheid laws, and basically it was forced segregation, and a couple of the students were interested in more specific details, and so they wanted to know, well, what were these laws? And so I wasn't really able to tell them because I don't know much about apartheid, and so I found a document online that went over some of the laws, so kind of a handful of the laws, and so they're going to be looking over that today. And then the other piece is we are looking at a much different text as well, The Sneetches by Dr. Seuss. And so the reason for that is because it is similar, but also I want to make sure that the texts that we read are accessible. And so in the Gifted and Talented program, I tend to get a bit carried away with really complex texts that are typically seen in like high school and even college classrooms. And so it's great for a lot of the kids, but some of the kids just aren't there. And so I think that this poem can really help to maybe engage those students that would feel that the other text might be a little out of their interest and range level. So they'll be connecting the text, they're looking across these two very different pieces to sort of analyze how we can look at the Dr. Seuss poem through the apartheid laws or vice versa.
Oh, this is going to be great. Okay, so we'll look forward to having the kids come in.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
We are going to be reading a couple different texts, and Lily, we're preparing for the Socratic seminar tomorrow, so the focus of today is just to read two different texts, and at the end of this little 2-day unit you're going to write a paragraph, and the topic is regarding apartheid acts. And a completely different text, Dr. Seuss's The Sneetches. And so we have two completely different texts that we're going to be analyzing. We're going to construct an analytical paragraph in the end. So raise your hand if that doesn't quite make sense to look at those two, Dr. Seuss and apartheid laws. It makes sense? Okay, awesome. Have you guys read The Sneetches before? The Sneetches? Okay, so what was the context of that? When did you read it?
I don't know.
Lily?
Dr. Seuss did it last year. I think we read it.
Okay.
Or the year before, or.
So every Dr. Seuss day, you
like Dr.
read The
Seuss day
Sneetches?
in library, we like Dr. Seuss day week, like the week of.
Right.
We read Dr. Seuss stuff in library.
Excellent.
Like,
Okay.
we've read The Sneetches.
I've only read it before this weekend. I only read it once, and it was a while ago, so I would never have made the connection on my own. But someone said that those two topics are related, so we're going to make that work. So we are going to start off by reading with a partner. Pass it down, please. And actually, let's read the first little bit together so we have an idea of exactly what we're doing. So just follow along with me for the first stanza, and then we'll stop and talk about what task we'll do with this. So, the Sneetches. Now, the star-bellied Sneetches had bellies with stars. The plain-bellied Sneetches had none upon theirs. Those stars weren't so big. They were really so small. You might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. And so, what do we see right there that I penciled in? A star. So anytime you see a star, what I'd like you to do is write a gist statement about that section. So just for that first stanza, I want you to write a gist statement off to the side, or in your reading response notebook is fine too. Just to summarize what the text is about up to that point. All right, if I call your card, please share your gist statement. Henry?
I'm going to pick my card. Oh, Ace of Hearts.
Ace of Hearts? I think we picked Malachi's again, didn't we? Okay, Malachi, can you share your statement?
I don't have one because I don't really know.
Yeah, it's I think poetry for me is one of the hardest things to understand, right? And so it says, now the star-bellied Sneetches had bellies with stars, the plain-bellied Sneetches had none upon theirs. So what are the Sneetches, Malachi?
Human, like, creatures.
Yeah, they're creatures that definitely resemble humans. And are they all the same, or do we have different types?
Well, some have stars and some don't.
That's it. That's it. So you write that down exactly. Yeah, great job. Okay, and then I'm going to have you continue now with a partner, because it looks like we all understand what we're doing. So I would like you to find your name tag and get with your partner, and you are going to read through this text, and you're going to stop at all the stars and discuss the gist together. So make sure that you are able to come to a consensus about what that passage is mostly about. And then there is a question once it's done, and it is, what is the theme of the Sneetches? So I'd like you to construct a thematic statement about the Sneetches. So if you were to really be specific and say, this is the best theme to support this story, then that's what it is. You don't have to put evidence or anything like that. Just write the thematic statement. And if you are finished with that, then you can read Watson's Go to Birmingham. I just went ahead, instead of those strips that I totally lost and are in just piles in my box here. So I just went ahead and printed off just front and back. Really simple. So if you are looking for the response questions for any of those chapters, they're right here. Okay, you may begin. And you guys can sit where you'd like. And then, buddy, you can sit where you'd like.
Hi, Marie.
I think I you are back to your.
Okay. So we push stars.
We're the best kind of snakes on the beaches. With the snoots in the air, they would sniff when they saw. We will have nothing to do with the plain belly sort. Whenever they were out walking, they hiked right on past them without even talking.
Star-bellied children not to play ball. Plain belly get in the deep gnawing. Star-bellied children only could play if their bellies had stars, and the plain belly children had to together. Then one day,
So like
the star-bellied Sneetches like shunned
Star-bellied Sneetches didn't let
plain-bellied Sneetches.
okay. Then Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar.
Dane was quite wrong. I'm quite happy to say that the Sneetches got really quite smart on that day. The day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches, and no kind of Sneetch is the best on the beaches. that day, all the Sneetches forgot about stars and whether they had one not upon theirs.
So it's pretty much saying that they don't really care whether they have stars or not.
The theme was quite wrong. I'm quite happy to say that.
What is the theme of the Sneetches? Write your response as a thematical statement. Thematic statement.
So that's 17, 24,
So
31.
the theme of the Sneetches is that it doesn't matter whether you're different, but everyone is
Look, see, they're happy because it's the stars.
No. McBean took all their money and thought they never won. He took all their money. That's it. As he left, drove his car off the beach. They will never learn. No, you can't teach a Sneetch.
Yeah.
Then, of course, from then on, as you probably guessed,
What is the theme of the Sneetches?
So it's like
people better. People are people. People are people no matter what they look like.
Are at the beach, they never will learn. You know, you can't teach a Sneetch. Things got into a really big mess, and they got really confused to where they didn't know who was who.
I'm gonna add a little bit more. What do you mean by people? So people are, I would replace that with something else. So people are people. What do you mean by this? This is
Basically, like
so
this,
while it's
like one guy was named George, and another guy was named Fred. And they just went through a bunch.
you're fine.
It would end up like, are you Fred?
Alright, we'll do about 2 more minutes, and then we'll
that there's no difference.
If they finally accept the difference. The theme of the Sneetches.
No, it's based off of segregation. Yeah, like segregation.
It's kind of like a protest story.
Yeah.
So what's the story about?
We're thinking it's like about differences, and the thematic statement's probably going to be something about like accepting differences and
And why do you say that?
well, it's there's a lot of segregation in the story, so I think it's like a protest story on it.
Okay, interesting. Great. And so what is a statement that you could make that incorporates what you said? Malachi, do you agree with what Andrew said? Okay. So what is important in the story, Malachi?
Like that they they're fighting a lot.
And they're fighting over what?
Tiny
Who's
stars on their
better?
bellies.
Yeah, and who's better?
Good. And are those stars important? Are you really better or worse depending on the star?
No.
So you might start off with, it is important. So that could be the start of your phrase.
It is important to accept differences.
Good. And is there one more clause that you can add to that? One more piece?
I'm thinking something about like because sometimes differences lead to segregation.
Great. Okay. Go ahead and write that down. That was great.
it is important to accept differences because sometimes differences can lead to segregation.
Right. So Malvin and Andrea, you can. Wonderful. Let's return to our seat, please. And we have one more document that we're going to be looking at.
They're kind of like the Jim Crow laws.
Okay, so similar to the Jim Crow laws. And what do you mean by it was hard?
They'd have to live in like these bad houses called homelands, and then they do stuff like working the mines was hard, and they wouldn't be able, and they'd hardly get paid anything. It was hard to support.
Yeah, so you remember quite a bit. Does anybody want to add anything else about apartheid?
It was like pretty segregated, kind of like, I guess,
Yeah, so we were talking about the Jim Crow laws, where you had different facilities, like different bathrooms, different schools.
They separated people of South Africa between, like, in these 4 sections, like, whites, coloreds, meaning mixed race. I think it was, like, just blacks for the ones with the darker skin. And then one other that I cannot remember.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And so these are very similar to the Jim Crow laws that we had in the United States. But in some ways they are different, and in some ways they're quite a bit worse too. So the other day, one of you asked about the actual laws, and I wasn't able to really respond to you. I just said, well, there are laws designed to segregate, to discriminate. But I couldn't give you any specific details, and so that's what this document is. They are the actual laws that were around, that were created during apartheid. And what you'll find is that some of the sentences are written with a South African dialect, which means a couple different things. It means that some of the spelling is different. So if you see the word color, it has a U in it, which is kind of you'll see that in Britain, I think you'll see it in Australia, and you see it in South Africa too, whereas we don't include the U in color in the same way. So the other piece is that some of the grammar is considered incorrect in American English, and so it is going to take a little bit of work to figure out the meaning of some of these phrases. So what's something that you can do if you and your partner encounter a phrase and you say, I have no idea what this means? Kelly?
Google it or ask someone who might know.
Good. Use resources. Use Google. Ask a teacher. Ask another partnership. Good. What else? Yeah, use context clues. So you're going to look for the words around it. What else can you do for context clues? Look at the words around it. What else?
Look at the title of it. Like it says Registration Act, Mixed Marriages Act.
Good. 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 Garrett?
Find like root words and stuff.
Yeah, so let's say that there's a particular word you're not familiar with. You can dissect that word and look for the root and the suffix and prefix. Okay, I think that's all that I need to say for the text. Your task is to annotate, and so if you look at the other paper that I passed out, it has some different ways that you can annotate. And Fisher, did you get one? Okay.
Oh, hold on. I might have took those and put it in my bag. Yeah, I did.
Okay. So if you don't have one, I'll come by and give it to you. Basically, it just kind of gives a review of what annotating is and when to use it. So if anything is confusing, interesting, surprising, or important, you might take some sort of note. So let's get with our partnerships and let's annotate the apartheid laws document. Same partnerships, yep. Same location.
Okay, I'll read the hold on. I'm just gonna cry. 1949. Yeah, 1949. Act number 57. Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act. This says prohibited marriages between white people and people non-white.
Other than that, it's pretty straightforward.
I'm gonna question.
1950 Act number 30.
The extra people and
Declared every South African to be racially classified as either black, colored, mixed, or
just because I'm
mixed or Asian.
prohibited marriages between white people and people and non-white. Required every South African to be racially classified as either black, colored, or mixed or Asian. I think we could write a test on that. Like to say you had to be either black, colored, or Asian.
I think we can say
Or white, because that was so definitely underline racial classified. And then like for the gist of it, we would say probably like segregated people based on skin color.
Like classified people.
Segregated.
And then our test is classified people of their skin or their color. Okay. 1950 Act number 41 Group Areas Act.
Forced separation between races through the creation of Santiston? That's how we go as it. Santiston residential areas, each designated for certain races. So,
Okay, this Santiston either means it's either the name of the residential areas or the place.
1950 Act number 44, suppression of
Communism. In the American Party in South Africa, the definition of communism was very basic. It included anything that calls for radical change in how
And Alan, can you tell us about communism?
Communism is a lot more like there's not really very poor people and not really very rich people. Like basically everything is owned by the government.
Yeah.
Okay. And how does that contrast to capitalism?
Capitalism, there is like drastic difference in people's wealth. A lot of people have more private property and stuff. It's like not as much stuff is owned by the government.
Okay, great. And so what is this act saying then?
It's pretty much saying that that pretty much there's no like communism. There's like you can't actually like very much whites are kind of like very rich, and then anyone that's not white is just
Poverty.
Good.
Yeah.
And so who benefits from communism? What's that?
Everybody.
Okay, good.
1951 Act number 46, Separation Representation of Voters Act, led to the removal of the non-whites from the voters roll. So that's pretty much saying that anyone that's not white can't vote. Council.
So make sure that you keep discussing the meaning of these acts, kind of like how we were doing.
Alright, so that's pretty much saying that
They have to live in these like designated areas that are probably very
poorly built and stuff. And they can't really live anywhere else.
White man had spent only spend a few hours each week in his own
So
home.
do you have any questions so far about any of these acts?
If he does so, he is guilty of
No, but there's some of them.
What do you mean they got pretty mean?
Like
I keep hearing
this one, like they force black people to carry identification at all times.
Mm-hmm. Does that remind you of anything else?
Wear gloves and carry
Any other event?
at all times. An African boy aged 16 skipped school in this.
It reminds me a little bit of the Holocaust and the laws that led up to the Holocaust.
They also have really bad grammar. This makes no sense. So I changed it. It says it used to say live in white towns had to be like the native Africans that could live in white towns had to be born. So I changed it if they
Doesn't have a job, but still.
Yeah, the grammar's a little interesting in this text. Okay. And so what do your annotations here mean?
I'm like 22 words.
Oh, okay.
Act number 49. The removal of the first separated. And then they're required. Next segregation and all public areas.
So what is important about removal here?
I also added that it's like
you have no say in who gets to decide whether we should do more of those their own property that you paid for.
What were you saying?
And you can't tell it.
I also added white to this list because then
Act number 34.
it's like
Investment
this mostly pretty much the entire apartheid laws and acts and stuff is all about putting white segregation, and yet they don't include like the main people who are making it, which is white.
And so who's it benefiting?
So, you're not allowed to teach African Americans to read
Yeah.
So which one are
if you are white.
An African boy aged 16 who has left school and lives at home with and is maintained by his parents but does not work may at any time be arrested without warrant by a policeman who has reason to believe that he is an idle and lazy person contributing to the downfall of society.
So basically, if you fit a certain criteria, you can be arrested for being lazy. Yeah.
And so why would that take place? Why would they bring the economy into it? So why would there be a different banking system? And what would the consequences of that be?
Okay. Read
Maybe even more differences in wealth. Yeah.
Okay.
So like very rich white people and black people.
Okay. And then they're kind of controlling where the money goes to.
Yeah. So like if there's like a lot of money, then maybe they could just like take some.
Right?
That's pretty much like what the entire thing is just doing to them.
What is?
Like the entire thing is like the Education Act. They would just like receive a poor education just so they couldn't like go to like good jobs or anything.
Here, like where it was like there was actually a law saying like books could not be shared between races. There were bunches of laws segregating the African Americans from us. It was literally insane. Okay. Okay.
amenities.
Do you know what that means?
I don't know what that is.
So, I was thinking amend because C-M-E-N and then D is amend. So A-M. So like amend means to like it means to like figure out kind of, I think.
So
Would that work in the context?
good.
No.
So separate amenities. So what is in this law? What is this law suggesting?
Okay, so it's saying
Oh, you have the right place places. like places are segregated.
Or races.
Places or what else?
Race, public transport.
So yeah, so public transportation,
Restaurants.
buildings, restrooms. Yeah.
So that's basically saying that you can segregate buildings, so like all that.
So those are considered what? Like, so the buildings are considered what?
Amenities?
Yep. So they're like services or buildings for people to use.
So
Good job.
it's saying like if that happens, blacks will not fight for themselves.
You are doing a phenomenal job with that. You're really digging into the text and you're looking at specific words and
Just like mostly gisting these, and then just finding confusing parts and messing, like marking them. Like
yeah, you're selling yourself short though because you're doing a great job at close reading.
That says anything.
Right.
Anything, like stealing an empty milk jug. I don't know
Right.
why that comes up in my
So
mind,
that
but
would be
punishable for life.
a terrorist act, taking an empty
Like
lunch tub like
if
that.
you pick up like an empty something or just a piece of paper that's on the street and you're gonna throw it away, and you find out, and that if you do that, you're suddenly in prison for life without trial. That's just stupid.
Picked up a piece of paper.
And the worst part about that is like like a policeman or something like that could seriously like, because there's no trial, so
Could make it up.
yeah, could totally make it up. What sucks? Jail for life. No trial.
Jail for life. You stole my son.
Alright friends, let's go ahead and leave our packets where they are. We'll continue when we get back. Okay, and today we are going to have a discussion, a whole group discussion, and the focus is to have us be prepared for the writing task that we're going to do a little bit later today. And there are 3 different parts to the writing task. The first one is finding parallels, so similarities between the Sneetches and the apartheid laws. And then the other one is, the other topic is looking at Dr. Seuss's or Theodore Dreiser's thoughts on basically racism, on segregation and discrimination. And then the last part is the Sneetches relevant today? So is it still important today, or have we kind of moved beyond these segregated and discriminated institutions? And so those are the 3 main categories that we'll be focusing on during this discussion. And it's okay, they all are fairly similar in a lot of ways, and so I think that we might bounce across those 3 topics, but we'll always try to focus on those. All right. And really the main purpose of the green sheet is just to make sure that you are building off of each other's ideas, and that we're not just having a monologue that's where just one person's talking. So it's important that we are actually building off of others' ideas, or even disagreeing. And so there is a section on there too that you guys saw where it says different ideas for how to disagree. Okay. So does anybody want to start off? Does anybody have any general ideas about any of those topics?
Yes. Yes. Okay, so I think that like the Sneetches still kind of is relevant today in many ways, but like one of them that is just kind of like with like white people too, because like people think, oh, they've had nothing happen to them, kind of like Miss Nunn, like with the swastika on her driveway and like the person following her, and then like me, my family's history goes back to the potato famine. Like I bet like Max and Malachi and Marlena like have some stories to tell too from like their culture. So like when like some people think like, oh my god, they were never discriminated against, she's just some stupid white girl, like that
does kind of annoy me. I'm like,
And like, well, lots of people are like, lots of people who are white are like treated like, oh, you're white, you're seen as the perfect being. While even today, still different races are being like forgotten and or treated terribly.
Although I have to say, white races were never treated as bad as some of other races.
yes,
Yeah,
that
that's
I
for sure.
completely agree with that one.
That's for sure. It's just like lots of people say, oh, whites never get discriminated against. They do.
They do, but just not as bad as other races.
Yeah.
And then adding off of what Callie said, even if it wasn't completely, it still teaches you about what happens in, I guess, a funner way.
And
I agree with Callie that the snitches is still prevalent today. And there's actually a lot of racism going on right now.
Yeah, I'd
Can you
say
expand
maybe
on that?
even more so.
Like Donald Trump is anti-Muslim. And
It's like
Okay.
shrinking monuments.
So,
And then there's
Like shrinking.
so I will
Navajo
step in as
sacred-
facilitator. Let's try to move away from specific current leaders. So, but what we can do is we can discuss some of the ideas that are popping up. So we have like the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter movement. So I think that's what you're saying, is that it's still in the news today and it's still a problem today. Good. And Henry, what were you going to say?
maybe even more so than back then. I mean,
How?
there's not segregation like there was back then, but now more like there are just still a ton of people doing it.
I disagree with that
Yes.
because, like, in the 60s and stuff, that was pretty bad racism. Like really bad.
I know.
Like
I'm not
with the
saying that
neighborhood
it wasn't.
baseball,
I'm not
Yeah.
saying that
but
it's
like
more so today.
they weren't allowed to like stay in hotels or eat
Yeah.
at restaurants because they were
It
black.
was really
Back then,
it was like,
slavery was legal, and that's
Like,
Well,
not
back
just
like
one of the
before
60s,
Lincoln.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's talking about way back then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait.
And nothing will ever top how bad that was.
Yeah.
Okay, so Henry, what do you want to expand on that?
I wasn't saying that it's worse now.
It's
I was
still
just saying that it's still pretty bad now.
Okay.
And even though like the racism isn't exactly to like the extent it was then, it still happens. It just happens in a different kind of way.
And
In a less
What could you explain what you mean by a different kind of way?
Like instead of like showing it like all the time, people will do it where no one will really know and stuff like that. Yeah.
So
and kind of
it's more subtle.
Yeah.
Like today, there's much more subtle things than like slavery, like how like black people or Hispanics might not be like paid as much,
Yeah.
and like they might have to like buy a home for more or something.
Like, yeah, like, building off of you, it's, like, way more subtle right now, because, like, back then, they were, like, everybody knew that, like, one person would, like, lots of people were, like, racist, and they were bold about, like, they were, like,
Proud sort of.
They weren't afraid to show it.
yeah.
Now people are passive aggressive about it too, and so that's one of the things that kind of makes it worse. Because if you're passive aggressive about it, then it seems like you're just like this perfect person, but like underneath you're like some racist Nazi or something. So then like if you're just like not like showing it, then you're just sitting there like hating this group of people for like no reason. Like
So that brings me to an idea that we are going to look at in our response. And it's about segregation and discrimination. Anybody share maybe the differences or similarities between segregation and discrimination? Or are they the same? Sometimes they're used as synonyms. Really?
Well, segregation is like separating people because of their race or physical features or anything really, and then discrimination is just like being rude to people because of their physical features, anything.
So
I heard a couple times that some of you are saying that it's that subtleness is actually worse in some ways. Can someone explain that? How when it's subtle, it's possibly more challenging than if it's just more blatant, more obvious? Garrett?
One reason that is because when it's subtle, other people don't realize how big of a problem it is. When it's a big thing that's going on, some people will realize this is a problem, we need to stop it. When it's subtle, people will be like, "Oh, this is just a small thing. It's not happening." And even though
lots of
it
people
could be
don't
happening to
realize.
thousands of people, just they're not talking.
And then like lots of people don't realize it's still going on and that needs fixed.
Yeah. It's sort of like going back to what Henry was saying. It's still, I wouldn't say as bad as segregation, but like Garrett said, if it's more subtle, it's harder to figure out.
And it's harder to address because you're not sure if you should say anything or how to feel. It can be really confusing. So let's go on to the topic of institutionalized racial segregation and discrimination. What do you think that institutional or institutionalized, how does that change segregation and discrimination? What do you think that? So looking at the root word there, what do you think?
It sounds like it's like the government is trying to like encourage people to discriminate against other people.
Like what?
Apartheid?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Andrew, yeah, very good. Okay, so let's move on to focusing on the texts. So let's spend a moment and talk about the parallels. So parallels, I think parallel lines. So you have the sneeches, and then you also have these apartheid laws. And how are they similar? And we're going to find those connections.
So I feel like the sneeches is different from the apartheid laws in a way that the sneeches isn't so severe. It's just like
It reminds me more of like the Jim Crow laws than the apartheid laws.
like
Can someone expand on that? How's it more like?
It's not as severe as like the apartheid laws.
like it's not
Apartheid's- It's go to jail for life for doing like one little thing.
for literally doing
Versus-
nothing. Normally, it's not. Oh, blacks get this half and whites get this half. Normally, it's like blacks get this little part and whites get the rest of the city.
That's a very good point.
Well,
Yeah, so if we look at the
that-
fourth, I believe it's the fourth stanza, about halfway down. They left them out cold in the dark of the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near. And that's how they treated them year after year. So that would be really good evidence to support the connection to the apartheid laws. Can someone find maybe text evidence in the apartheid laws that would go along with that section?
1970, Bantu Homeland Citizen. A new black South African citizenship and required all black people to become a citizen of the homeland designated for his or her ethnic group.
And can you explain how that connects?
It means that they can't live in a big city. They have to live in the small area that their race lives in.
Another act is the first page, 1951, Act number 68, Bantu Authorities Act. This created black homelands, regional authorities, and abolished the Native Representative Council. So it says like blacks have to live on the homelands, and that's like where they created. That's the creation story of the homelands.
It's like the rubber reservations.
While we're on the topic of apartheid laws, I'm just gonna point out that a few of them
Were actually that.
are like you don't have a trial, so the police officer could just make it up and put you in jail for the rest of your life. I was thinking the terrorism. The last sentence is it'll also allow permanent imprisonment without trial to anyone who violated his laws.
Also, one thing that I think is that Act 1951, Act number 52, gave the Minister of National Affairs the ability to displace blacks from public and privately owned land. That fits because right there it's saying, oh, we're deciding not to let you near the fire or near the living area. We're going to put you over here at the dark part.
And that's saying like they're.
What I really like there is how you directly connected the two. And so when you're doing your paragraph, you want to make sure that you expand on that thinking and explain how those two connect. So you gave two brilliant examples that really show that commonality.
Jail. In 1953, IRLAC number 13, it says that an African boy aged 16 could pretty much, if he dropped out of school and lives with his parents,
And he doesn't have a job.
Yeah, he could be arrested for just being lazy.
And I guess the question is he really?
Yeah.
Do you think the boy would really be
the
lazy?
downfall of society. Yeah, and it would be really hard for an African American 16-year-old to get a job in that time.
Yeah.
Most persons would say,
you're not making
old
it-
and you're black, I'm not going to give you a job here. So that's basically
Too
saying,
old.
oh, you weren't given a
Too
job
young.
because our job system isn't,
Is it fair?
Guess what? Oh, sorry, we're going to put you in prison.
Oh, yeah. And then if that was me, I'd say, oh, sorry that you didn't give me a job. And then you get put in prison.
Yeah, it's punishment for not having a job that you could never get.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. What's that called?
Irony?
Close to that. It starts with a P. I was thinking paradox, where it's.
And then Act number 64, the Natives Prohibition of Inheritance Act, I don't know, denied black people the ability to appeal to courts if they were forcibly removed from their land. So they could not make a trial, but just a guy who has tons of land, maybe like a farmer or something, and you say, oh, I want your land, you can live over in that shack over there.
They can't
So
argue
what
at all.
Yeah.
They can't. That kind of fits with something else we learned in social studies. It's that the government was taking some of these farmers' farms away because they weren't able to pay, but the farmers were saying that the new state taxes were putting them in debt.
Yeah.
And that sometimes then probably might have been soldiers that weren't paid yet.
Yeah.
And that kind of fits with that. That it's not fair that their land's getting taken.
I can't pay you if you don't pay me.
Reasons that's the
Yeah.
state's fault.
Right.
Well, that's really similar to like how American soldiers and Americans just came in and just took all the land from Native Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I can't pay you if I'm already been paying you all of my money, like from taxes or something like that.
Right.
It just
And that's where I think it just feels like it's not fair.
you still have to pay
Well,
me.
like all of this
I know
is
you
not
haven't
fair.
paid me.
What we haven't discussed yet is the second part, and it's what is Theodore Dreiser's thoughts on institutionalized racial segregation and discrimination. So for this one, we'd look probably specifically at the Sneetches, and we'd tie it back to theme. So yesterday you wrote thematic statements, and I imagine that your thematic statement would be pretty similar to Theodore Dreiser's views. So let's see. Malachi, can you share out just a little bit about what you think Dr. Seuss feels about racism?
Well, I think he doesn't like it, and once he didn't like it, and he wanted to stop it right away, so he wrote Sneetches to help with that, and trying to convince the kids that they need to help try and stop it when they get older, so then they know, so then the kids know what's happening, like, before they, like, grow up and become a part of it.
Can we give you a quick round of applause? That was brilliant, Malachi. What I really liked about that is that you brought it back to a concern that I had with the Sneetches, which is that it's kind of a silly poem, like the rhymes are just kind of silly, right? Sneetches on beaches, like that's just a really weird, kind of silly children's story. But yet we're talking about it with these really important topics. But what you said made it a lot of sense to me because the audience is for kids. And so it's to help kids kind of have a different perspective on diversity.
Like, know what's happening.
Like kids
Yeah,
grow up with these stories, and they like learn from these stories as they grow up, and that's like developmental for them. So like if they grow up learning these tales, like when they read this, when they're like 4 or 5 years old, they are like, oh yeah, this is a fun story. And as they grow up, they start realizing, oh my gosh, when I grow up, I need to change this because this is not right. And they just grow up off of these stories. And so if the stories are teaching them to make a change when they grow up, they're gonna.
He's informing them of what his generation has done so that the next generation can fix.
Yeah, and I always think that he's just kind of like, in the end, we're all human. So
Yeah.
let's
Like
let the children know this through fluffy creatures, so then in the end, we're all happy fluffy creatures.
And actually, leading off that, I was looking at some Dr. Seuss information and articles online, and he actually got in kind of a bit of trouble-ish because some of his earlier stories had some pretty racist pictures, so very stereotypical American Indians and so on and so forth. So even he who wrote this really great story has some flaws too.
It's less that they're like, oh, this is no longer cool. It's like they're like, oh, we don't want to be similar to them. We want to be special. We want to be our hierarchy selves.
Like adding on to Andrew, how they're like when they get stars, with a starless species, they get stars. Like they keep on cycling back and forth, sort of how fidget spinners became really popular, and if you had a fidget spinner, you were automatically really cool. And so just like the Sylvester McMonkey McBean, who had the star making star off machine, he made a bunch of money just like the people who were selling fidget spinners.
We're going to end this here in just a moment, but I want to actually end it on Fisher's statement. So what question did you have?
When was this written? Because we were in library. We read some of the Dr. Seuss books, and some of them Miss Nunn said lots of them. If you really read them really closely, they have a huge meaning. Maybe the Lorax has a big meaning.
Save the trees.
Yeah, and tons of other stuff.
Butter battle.
Yep. Just when was this written? So
Building up the fish for sure. If Dr. Seuss wrote his books nowadays, they would be much different. They would have much different racial problems.
Yeah, maybe not even racial problems. It might be problems with
Our government. He'd definitely write something about our government.
Yeah. The butter battle.
Let's not go off that.
It was written in 1953.
Oh, so yeah, that was.
So what was going on in 1953? What had just happened in 1953?
World War II.
It's after World War II.
Yeah.
And what do we know about World War II? That's similar to the story.
The Nazis and the Jews.
Right. So yeah, you're definitely on the right track. Those are the big ideas. So it was pretty similar to apartheid in that before World War II, there were laws in Germany where if you were considered Jewish, you had a curfew. So it started off with these really simple laws where, okay, so you are Jewish, you have a curfew. And that's fairly,
subtle.
It's very subtle. And it's okay to say, well, this isn't fair, but I'm going to stay home, right? And then the laws were gradually increased.
And then until it gets concentration camps.
Exactly, yeah. And so it just kept ratcheting up over time. So what else is happening in 1953?
Civil rights movement.
We're building up to that. 1953. Directly related to the text. Yes. So apartheid officially started in 1948, and I think the first law that we have on here is 1949, I believe.
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully that gives you quite a bit to work with. Your next task is to you can work with a partner if you want. You can work in a trio by yourself, and you're going to fill out the plan first. it can be a pretty simple plan. You don't have to go into too much detail. And for direct evidence, you might even just have like a page number on here with maybe a paragraph or stanza number as well. You don't have to directly rewrite the whole quote in here if you don't want to, although it might make your writing easier. And then the next part of the plan is on the back of the page. And so this one is about Dr. Seuss's thoughts towards institutionalized racism. And then direct evidence over here. So where in the text would you find the evidence to support the thought that you wrote down here? And then the final piece is the Sneetches still relevant today? And I think that should be pretty easy for you guys to come up with ideas. You don't have to fill up every single box. I would say if there are 4 boxes, you'd be probably fine filling up 2, although it wouldn't hurt to do more. And then, if you do get done with the plan, you can start working on your draft right here. Okay. Any questions? Awesome. Brilliant job, guys. That was fantastic. Very good comments there. Okay.
Okay, so mini unit checklist. Engage in a sporadic seminar. Done. We already did that. Create a plan. No, we've not done that. Okay. Parallels and direct evidence. So, how are they similar? And then we need to have some direct evidence.
Right, so they're similar in the way, like, how,
They have to be separated. They can't live together.
yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
The two groups?
Yeah, different groups.
The 2 groups. Is it racist to call the 2 different Sneetches racist?
So in this, it says that, like the 4th
Okay.
stanza, it says that, just the entire thing says, when Starbelly Sneetches had Frankfurter roast or picnics or parties or marshmallow toast, they never invited Plain Belly Sneetches. They left them out cold in the dark of the beaches.
They left them out cold in the dark of the beaches.
Okay, and then we could do the Bantu Authorities Act. Created black homelands.
Created black homelands.
For the parallel, what is similar between this and that?
Separate people into
Yeah. And more than that, it looks like they're excluding one group from access to another area, right? So that would be your parallel. And then the direct evidence would be what? Exactly. Andrew, did you catch that? So do you have an idea for a parallel between these?
Theodore Geisel's thoughts. Direct evidence.
So one of his thoughts was that...
Oh, wait, the very end.
It says that they became very smart that day, and they figured that the Sneetches were Sneetches. Plain belly or not. Or Starbelly or not.
The day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches.
Okay,
you could just say Sneetches are Sneetches.
Sneetches are Sneetches.
Yes, which is...
Okay, what are his thoughts though?
That people, no matter what color
Sneetches
their
kind of
skin
represent
is,
humans-ish.
well, that's not his thoughts. His thoughts are that everyone is created equal.
Yeah.
All men are created equal. Say all men. That's what Thomas Jefferson was getting at.
Not even all men.
Yeah, just all white, rich men.
Christian
Men.
Okay. Okay, one more. Theodore Dreiser's thoughts.
What's another?
He's kind of getting out at a kind of like segregation It says, like, when the star-bellied children went out to play ball, could a plain belly get in the game? Not at all.
Because they had.
I guess.
I mean,
That's kind of like.
I feel like it's kind of stupid. They explains like
What's
what's
that time?
going on and how like some people are considered more superior based on their skills
Or
stuff. Yeah, based on their star.
based on a star? Based on a green patch on the star.
And so direct evidence has to be a direct quote.
Okay, then direct evidence, we could say, when the star-bellied children went out to play ball, and could a plain belly get in the game? Not at all.
I'm not gonna write a bunch of rhyming.
Okay, you could say stanza 2, sentence 1.
Either way.
Is this signature still relevant today? Yes, the star's kind of like a trend, and then we can have another one where it's yes, because today we still kind of discriminate, and
All right, friends, that is time.
we don't discriminate against.
Materials exactly
Yeah,
what we got.
So, Chris, what a great 2 days. This last lesson that we watched, powerful conversations, as I said. It's really amazing to listen to the kids and what their thoughts are and the comparison of the text that you brought about. So, I guess kind of in our follow-up is did the lesson go as you had planned when you were thinking about, a couple days ago, planning this out with the 2 text comparisons? Is that how you planned it?
No, not at all. I'm a little obsessive with a lot of different things, and projects being one of them, and so I constantly kind of rework the prompts, rework the ideas depending on how it goes. Because I've done projects before where it's really elaborate, and from the get-go I have, this is what we'll do on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and then it just doesn't, sometimes it just doesn't click. And so I'm pretty responsive to how the kids are currently doing, which is okay if you happen to have a little bit more time, but I'm always doing last-minute changes. And so I was really excited that the kids were able to make so many connections across the texts, and that's one of the things I wasn't sure about. Because like I've been saying, it's kind of a silly text, and I wanted to make sure that we're honoring the importance of this topic, and that we're not bringing light to apartheid, for example. But I thought that overall they did a nice job at seeing that.
Okay. So with that, as far as the students, did they meet some of those objectives that you thought?
Yes. And as far as the speaking, I would say that most of the students did a really nice job. There were 3 students in particular that were kind of holding back, but when prompted, they would give pretty solid responses. So it seemed like they really did a nice close read of both texts, and were actively thinking, even if it didn't necessarily look like they were. And then the second piece to this is a writing task, and so they haven't started the writing task, so that will really determine for me if they've if all of the supports have been working. So the supports for close reading a text, where they're in partnerships and it's very specific. So, for example, for the next 10 minutes, this is the text we're going to dive into. Here are some of the annotations that I would like to see. And then the Socratic seminar, the class discussion, all those things are supports so that they are able to write, hopefully, a quality paragraph. One of the issues that we've had for a while is just expanding on our ideas and elaborating, and hopefully with all of the discussion that they've been doing, it will come out a bit more naturally in their writing.
So really, that's kind of what next for the kids instructionally is then that writing piece to culminate the 2 different articles and then all the conversations that have been happening.
Yeah, and also looking at more on-demand writing. So some of the writing tasks we've done, they've extended for 1 or 2 months even. And so for this one to be a 2-day unit and then culminating in a writing task, I'm interested to see how they'll do.
Okay, so to kind of pull everything to a close is when you think about advice that you might have for other teachers, some takeaways both about instruction or management, what kinds of things would you offer up?
What comes to mind right now is being highly reflexive. So really thinking and reflecting on how a lesson went or how an interaction went, both positives and negatives, and letting that soak in and then finding a plan. So this is how I felt during this experience. This is how I've kind of interpreted this experience. What can I do moving forward? So if it's a positive, you might even look at that and say, well, why is it a positive? And then what can I do to continue those positives? Or even, this was a perfectly pleasant interaction, but learning is sometimes really hard. So maybe it was too pleasant. Maybe the kids could have been pushed a little bit further, or maybe I could have expanded my own way of looking at the situation. And then any sort of negative experiences, whether it's a lesson that flops, whether it's a student who's not engaged or a whole class that's just not engaged in the activity, just kind of step back and try not to take it personally, and then just respond by doing something different or maybe even the same going forward.
Great. Well, thanks for letting us have the opportunity to come in and be part of your classroom, and then also sort of to get a snapshot of what a GATE program might look like. And we'll look forward to seeing some of the writing samples from the kids. So thanks again.
We've enjoyed it too. Thank you.